Hi, Jessi. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Christy?
I'm great, thank you. And I'm very happy to have you here today to share all the wonderful things you're doing with Habitual with me. And just to give the listeners a little insight that Jessi and I are friends and have known each other now for a little over a year. She was so kind as to invite me onto her platform, Habitual, to share my story. And I have just watched you grow exponentially this platform in the past year that is just incredible. And it's all about female empowerment and females in leadership positions and just kind of pulling each other up, supporting each other. And I'm so here for all of it.
Well, thank you. And thanks for being such a great supporter of Habitual and of me. And it's been so lovely getting to know you and supporting you as well.
Thank you. It's equally as meaningful to me. So let's start by, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what your career path has been prior to Habitual?
Sure. So I think it's interesting when we get asked this question, or to tell a little bit about ourselves, because we so often jump right into what we do for a living. And there's a lot more to me than just what I do for a living. And so first and foremost, I am a wife and partner to the most amazing husband, Connor, and a mom to my daughter, who's 3. Her name's Elle, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute.
Who's super cute.
Thanks.
I'm just going to say she's really cute.
Cute and funny and truly my, light in my life. And I share all of that because the people who are surrounding me are, my purpose and my reason. And so what I do every day for a career or for a living is, just part of that life. And I'm a Philadelphian, I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm a feminist. I truly believe in equality for women and supporting other women to allow them to reach their level of success. And so before coming into Habitual a year or so ago, my whole career has been around working with women, empowering women, helping them develop their leadership. My first job out of college was I traveled the country and went to 23 different colleges and universities as a women's leadership consultant. And I worked with thousands of women that year to help them develop their leadership skills. And I kind of always thought, well, this will just be a 1-year job. And it really opened up this world of helping people see their potential. And so I went on to get my master's in higher education. I always thought I wanted to just, mold young minds. And I worked in higher ed for 10 years. Primarily within leadership departments, working with college students and career advancement. I eventually got to the point where molding young minds was really, not my sole purpose, but really helping women in general, regardless of their age. And for the past 6 years, I've been working as a chief operating officer at a global women's nonprofit where we, develop leadership programming and experiences for women from 18 to 85. And so that's been a really great opportunity for me both to learn the business side of running a company or an organization as the COO, but also still getting to work with women and mentor and advise and supervise women of all ages. So it's the thread of what I've always done. And I don't know, Christy, if I knew it young in life that this was why I was put on this earth, but there is no doubt now that, my soul's purpose is to help women rise up and be leaders in whatever definition that is. I always joke, like, if you got your children out of the house this morning with clothes on, you are a leader. And so
wow, I relate to that big time.
The definition varies, what leadership is, but that's my path to Habitual.
That's really so interesting for me to hear that backstory because there was a good bit of that I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does make sense that I love talking about the fact that our paths are not really meant to be this linear experience, right? And that it's wonderful to look back and see that you let your intuition guide you, and that passion that you knew you had for not just leadership, but for women in leadership. And you let that guide you, and just all the ways that it took you in a direction that's now so aligned for you. I love hearing that backstory. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
And so your mission is to help women rise to their fullest potential and design a more fulfilled life. Before we get into all the ways that Habituelle has grown into the incredible leadership community that you're now at the helm of, can you first start by telling us how this idea for Habituelle came to be and how you first got things started?
So in the summer of 2022, I got sick with COVID, and I was lying in bed uninterrupted for 5 days, which has not happened since with a 3-year-old. But I was lying there, and Roe v. Wade had just been overturned, and I sort of was laying there thinking, like, I feel helpless. Like, I feel like women just took this step back into history. Like, my purpose is to help women's voices be amplified, and this just felt like, yikes, what's happening to women and our voices, and we're being silenced here. And so I knew me individually could not make a huge change on, say, Capitol Hill, but what could I do within my own community? What could I do locally to help women amplify their voices and to be heard and seen and feel the sense of belonging? And so I was lying there, and I'm like, well, I have this big network in the Philadelphia area. Why don't I just start talking to women and hear their stories and give them a platform to share their journey, their challenges, their successes, their similarities? And so the problem was that I could not come up with a good name for this project that, let me tell you, was supposed to only be a 1-year project, but here we are. I thought I could do anything for a year. So let's just see if I sit down with other women and what can I learn? What can I see could evolve from this idea of just listening to people? And so the idea of habits kept coming up for me, and I'm like, well, I wanted to squeeze Elle's name into the title, but everything I was coming up with was like super corny. And finally I thought, what about taking what I know has been success, has allowed me to reach success, which is consistency and habits and creating habitual actions, and just add in Elle's name, make it a little French, and it becomes Habituelle. And so Habituelle was formed. And from that day, it has just become this, this cornerstone of my own journey. Even if it only had lasted 1 year, which we're sitting here today and it's older than that, but it's just such a remarkable way of giving women a platform and also honoring my little girl and the impact that she's had on my life.
It's so beautiful. I just love hearing how that all came together. And I can tell you that from the perspective of somebody who's been, interviewed by you for Habituelle, it really is a very empowering moment when you feel seen and heard in a way that, I know your process is kind of people that are on typically nominate somebody else. And so I was nominated by a mutual friend of ours, Hallie, and it felt like such an honor. It was this moment where I was like, I'm in the doing, right, of the things that I'm passionate about and the work that I've been just so had my head down and doing for the past 10 years. And to just have another female acknowledge, hey, I see what you're doing and I'm inspired by what you're doing. And I want, this person who's trying to amplify the voices of women locally, I want her to interview you. And, and then I sat down with you and was like, oh my gosh, it was so much more than I expected it to be. It was empowering. It was validating. It was just this incredible feel. And then I walked away from it like, okay, well, now we're going to be best friends. And now every single woman you also have this incredible way of bringing everybody together, right? You've been really intentional about creating community, not just individually interviewing all of these people and sharing the common threads. You've done such great things to bring us all together and allow us to feel a sense of community. And I did just want to make sure I told you that it really made such an impact for me. And I know that I probably speak for every single woman who's been a part of it. And that leads me to my next question. I was wondering, after that first year, right? You said it was only going to be a year, and here we are, already gone beyond that.
Yeah.
What was the impact of that year for you?
So it ended up being that I interviewed 96 women in the first year. And Christy, I can tell you what I talked about with every single woman. Like it, eventually I probably won't be able to remember every conversation, but it's pulling data. It's hearing the common themes. It's hearing what are the common challenges that we have? What are women seeking? What are the gaps in our leadership? And being able to hear maybe even the unspoken and being able to connect the dots. And so the impact for me has been, I've learned from each of you. It's like a master class every time I'm sitting down with another woman. But more so, it is seeing the sense of community happening. I created the space. You all are making the connections. And I get so much joy out of seeing two women who met through Habituelle taking a walk around their neighborhood together, or women supporting each other's small businesses, or becoming clients of each other's, or, at its essence, if the project is done right, you would read someone's quote and if you resonated with them, you would reach out and say, hey, I saw what you said, I experienced that too. How can I help you? And that's what we're building here. It is a place for women to be vulnerable and to share their stories, and for other women to support those stories and say, because we all have been through a lot of the same challenges. And so if we all came together, is there anything more powerful than women supporting women? Look at Taylor Swift and Beyonce right now, supporting each other, showing up to each other's events. Like, what? They're giving us this example. We need to lean into it. All women need to be able to lean in and say, if I don't have what you have, but you have something I don't, like, how do we share resources? How do we support each other? And knowing that we're all sort of navigating a lot of the same challenges and just need a little bit of extra cheerleading to support each other. Yeah. So the impact is, like, at my core, such joy when I see that is happening without me even making the connection. There's just naturally women are reaching out and supporting each other.
It's so powerful. And you're absolutely right. Like, what an incredible example females like Beyonce and Taylor are setting for us. And also the ripple effect that this has when you just normalize women supporting women, right? Because unfortunately in the past we've been pitted against each other more than we've been taught to support each other. And we've learned how to just have gut reactions of jealousy when somebody has what we want, instead of what you're explaining, where it's like, how could we help each other get that too, right? And I want for every female all the things I want for myself and more. I dream big for myself, and simultaneously I dream big for every female in my life, especially my daughter. And I know that you probably feel the same way about Elle. Much of what I think our generation right now is waking up to, but also really taking this call to action, is to be the example and to set a new standard of how females can interact with one another and support each other and raise each other up. And I do think, as frustrating as it can be that there's setbacks, we are making huge strides, and the only way that we're going to do that is together. And that really is the power of community and the power of what you're doing here. It gives me the chills thinking about it. And like I said, because I've been able to experience it firsthand, from the event you hosted that was kind of meant to be like a celebration of the birthday of Habituelle, right? After 1 year. Jessi brought us all together for this incredible rooftop happy hour that was like such a dream come true. I remember just being there being like, oh my God, look at this view, This food's incredible. But the fact that I got to turn and look around and there was nothing but smiling faces of women just giddy to be there with each other all who in their own right were pretty badass at what they do, right?
Yeah.
And they were all just excited to be there and support one another. And I know you would never take all the credit for that, but the truth is you were the catalyst for that. And that's why I think what you're doing is just so important. And you say that you've spoke to dozens of women, or as you spoke to dozens of women in the beginning, right? You started to hear themes of challenge, needs, and desires. So can you tell us more about that, and what were your biggest takeaways from those initial conversations of what is it that women are saying they're challenged most by, especially, maybe in leadership roles?
Yeah. And I think going back to, hearing the unsaid, right? So when I think of, say, the first 15 interviews, it was so clear that the women on the other side of the table from me did not see how others view them. They did not see, like, looking at you right now, I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman is so incredible and is so badass. And like, I can't wait to work more with her. We don't say that enough to each other, right? And so then therefore I make up a story in my own head of how people are viewing me. Oh, she probably thinks this or that. And that's not true, because how we view each other is we're not sharing that information. We don't get that data. I don't sit down and say, Christy, could you tell me how you feel about me today? Like, we don't have those conversations. We might pick up on cues here and there. But that was one of the biggest things that I saw and observed, was that women truly did not know how other people felt about them in such a positive way. Right.
And they probably assume the worst.
The worst. The inner critic in our head is the biggest challenge that all women face, is our own criticism, the own loop that's happening in our mind. And the reality is what would it look like if you said to your husband, could you give me some feedback on how I'm showing up as your wife? And like, maybe tread lightly on the question, but or when to ask, but we just don't tend to do that. We do 360 evaluations in our day jobs, and we get feedback from as a manager or, up and down, but we're not asking the people who are closest to us, like, how am I doing? How do you perceive me? How am I showing up? How can I be better? So that was one of the bigger takeaways. But the second one being imposter syndrome comes up in almost every single conversation, and the words imposter syndrome or self-doubt. And it makes me sad that is the topic of conversation all the time, and that there is so much self-doubt. The good news is that we have the power to change it. We have the power to change our mindset and change the voice that's happening in our own head. I always joke that my inner critic has a South Philly accent. And so
I love it.
And so when I hear the South Philly accent in my head, I know that that's criticism. And I snap out of it and I say, is that true? That's my gut reaction now, is that true? And if it's not true, or I don't have fact to back up the voice that's happening, I let it go. And that takes a lot of work, right? It's not something that just happens overnight. And it's not, I'm never like resolved of the inner critic, but can I silence the inner critic a little bit more so that I can do what I want to do and be my authentic self and show up? Because when we show up, our true and authentic selves, Christy, there's nothing we can't do. Literally nothing. I may not ever become Taylor Swift, but if I want to become Taylor Swift, I can work towards that, right?
You totally can.
It's just changing the narrative in our own mind, because I truly believe most people are in awe of the person that's across the table from them.
Wow. That hit when you said that at first. It's like just so true that we sit there and come up with this whole idea of how we're perceived, and we stress over it. Mm-hmm. And you also then try to manipulate how you show up to gain more approval and appeasal based on not even facts.
Yes.
Right? Like, you don't even, and I love that you said that, because, and thank you for what you said. And I totally toss that right back to you, that I look at you and think, my God, she's so incredible, what she's built so amazing, the fire she has for this, the passion. I'm just so inspired by you. And we don't say that to each other. We just don't. And it's kind of sad that we think it's weird to. I've recently in the past year dipped into more of like a self-love practice. And it's been life-changing for me, honestly, because what it's done is at first it was very hard and uncomfortable to say to myself, I love myself. I love myself. As you're saying, like you were switching that inner critic and giving it something else to say. That's what I was doing. I was replacing it with the words, I love myself. And it literally made me cringe at first. And it felt so uncomfortable. But then this miraculous shift started to happen. And now when I when I would have gone to think something negative, it's now my first thought is, I love myself. And what it does is it puts my entire being at ease. And I think what it does in relation to what you're talking about is it allows me to stop caring so much about what anybody else thinks and instead remind myself, I've got your back.
Yeah.
I care about you. I've got your back. So it really doesn't matter if the person sitting across from me is thinking the absolute worst.
Right.
Because I like me enough. And again, that's something we haven't been taught. It hasn't been modeled to us. It hasn't been explained to us. And that's not anybody's fault. Right. But we have the choice. That's the point. Yeah. Exactly like you said. We have the choice to shift our thoughts, to change that inner critic's dialogue, and what power there is in that, to know that you have the ability to do that. And I also think it's the power of what you're doing, because you're trying to help women understand all of this and show up as their most authentic selves, especially in leadership roles. So you really say that if you could be anything, you'd choose to be a megaphone for incredible women who are working hard, leading their communities, and choosing to lift others as they climb. I literally got chills when I read that on your website. I just love that. So can you tell us more about Habitual Leadership and how you've expanded your goals and missions beyond the blog? What is it that you're now offering?
Yeah. So, after interviewing just last week, I interviewed my 115th person, and it is like a dissertation, right? An ongoing dissertation of me learning and hearing and observing what women need. And for me, when I set out to do Habitual over a year ago, it was so much about creating a space for women to amplify their voices. And now their voices are being amplified. What's the next step in helping them grow their leadership? And so building something that the data that I'm collecting through these interviews tells me that women need. And as someone who at a young age in my leadership, or at a younger point in my leadership journey, got my first executive coach, that changed my leadership. And so I kept hearing women need more mentors. They need more coaching. They're seeking more ways of growing and being better and living a more fulfilled life. And I was able to find that through all of those things, through mentors, through therapy, through coaching. I always say that if you could have a therapist, a coach, and a mentor, you'd have the three wise people supporting you, right? And I say three wise people because who knows if they were wise men or not. They were wise people in my world. But by investing in your own development is critical. And so I said, well, why don't I offer coaching services? And so I knew it was something I always wanted to do. And I always thought it would be like a later in life thing. But someone said, why are you waiting? If it lights you up, just do it. So I got my certification from Brown University on leadership and performance coaching early this year. And in September, launched Habitual Life and Leadership Coaching. And it's been great because I love working with women one-on-one, helping them set goals, helping them reach the goals, and serving as a cheerleader for that, holding them accountable to reaching them, and celebrating with them. So it's just another avenue to help women live that fulfilled life and feel seen and heard and owning their power. with that, there's the one-on-one coaching, but then there's also what is truly my, like, lights my life up, which is the idea of bringing multiple women together in a small group setting to tackle challenges together. So doing the inner work on your own, but then coming to the group and talking about it out loud and saying, yeah, I experienced this. This is how I'm navigating fear in my own life. So in January, we'll launch the first iteration of the Inner Circle, which is a group, in-person group coaching program that goes throughout the whole year. Change doesn't happen overnight. And so what does it look like to commit to a year of growth and allowing women to do the inner work, like you mentioned, like that inner introspective look at yourself is very hard. Mm-hmm. But if you really want to live a fuller life, you can't get to that without doing that hard work, that difficult work that is uncomfortable. And so what a better way to do that than doing some private work on your own, but then coming together and having this group of women supporting you, going through the same transition, same evolution over the year, and being able to leave the year and say, not only did I really discover myself, but I also have these badass women supporting me that are now my close network of, professional network of women. So it's kind of a win-win. Yes. For anybody who's participating.
What a gift. What a gift you're offering in these programs, because it's so invaluable to feel a sense of community when you're working on yourself. Mm-hmm. I have definitely found that you're right. The inner personal work needs to be done on your own. Yeah. And it is hard work, and it's such a hard lift. And it's challenging too when you feel like you're the only person right, who's doing it, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm seeing benefits from my growth, but then there's no one around me that relates to this. Right. That is where the value of having community is so important. I remember, like I said, right when I had the interview with you and I was in the midst of my own personal growth, I had just started my own business too, or I was about to launch my business, I guess, when I first met you. I had been doing my nonprofit work for the past 10 years, but I was about to launch my own business, the production company. And I just remember feeling like up until that point, as an entrepreneur especially, it can be very lonely. Yeah. Because you have these big goals and these things you're working towards, but you're sort of doing it all on your own. And you don't always have people around you that get it. But then as a female, I think it's even more isolating, because how many females did I know at the time who were as ambitious as me? Mm-hmm. Plenty of ambitious women in my life, but in different ways, And what your community did for me was make me feel like I was surrounded by women who were really aligned with the specific kind of path that I had found myself on. And just having that sense of community is such an incredible gift. And I would encourage everybody to absolutely look into what Jessi is offering, because I think it's a really special opportunity. And especially, like you said, in that closer setting, right? There's so much power in that. How important would you say it is that as women, we realize our purpose, expand our potential, and own our power?
Well, you can't get to the second two without figuring out your purpose. So I believe that you do that inner difficult work and you start to really realize your purpose. What was I put on this planet to do? And I don't think you just wake up one day and know that. It takes the introspective work and the questioning and the exploring and researching. Someone once had asked me, Jessi, what are you doing when you lose all sense of time? And it's this. I lose all sense of time when I sit down with women and I think you and I agreed on skip the small talk. Let's just dive right in. I just could talk in depth to women about what's important to them and what matters. And I don't really have a lot of time for the small talk because there's just so much to learn. And I guess that's the curious person in me. But, once you figure out the purpose and you've done the hard work and you're confidently, I know that this is what I was put on the planet to do, you realize that potential. You see what I said earlier. There is nothing I can't do. I'm just going to keep taking one step forward and following, listening to what's lighting me up. Where does my heart go? Where does my mind go when I am doing something that I love? That's what we need to be doing more of. Where you spend your time thinking and where you spend your time in joy, that is your purpose. And so then you realize the potential, which is literally endless. Anything you want to do, you can put your mind to if you silence that inner critic. And then your power comes with feeling confident in both of those things, being able to say, I confidently know that this is why I was put on the earth. And I confidently know that I can do whatever I put my mind to. That's power. Because there's nothing that can stop you then. And being able to say, society might be telling me that I should be doing this or I should be doing that, but confidently showing up and saying, no, that's not for me. This is what's right for me. And listening to that whisper that's telling you, keep going forward. So you can't have one without the other. And the ability to own your power and know that you're on the path that you were meant to be on. Yeah, what's a better feeling than that? I just don't know.
There's nothing better. I can say that with absolute certainty. There's nothing better. And I'm so glad that you brought up the shoulds and supposed tos. We don't talk about that a lot either. But the truth is, we are subconsciously a lot of times just, in this pattern of trying to make sure that we're achieving those shoulds and supposed tos, right? And oftentimes denying what that little whisper is saying.
Right.
And I think it's so important to bring that conversation to the forefront of, and I also think it's a great question to ask yourself, what are you doing when you lose all sense of space and time, right?
Yeah.
What is everybody has, you may not know what your purpose or meaning necessarily is yet, but you can ask yourself that question and you'll likely get an answer that there's something that you feel passionately enough about that takes you to that place where you're like, I don't care where I am, what time it is, or what else is going on. I am in the zone.
Yeah. And so many people are afraid to explore that. They'll make up excuses in their head of well, I can't do this or that. I love, talking sports, but I'll never be a sports announcer. Well, with that attitude, of course you won't be. I had a conversation with my husband recently over date night, and I said, honey, if you could do anything you wanted, there was no restrictions, you could just live out your dream, what would it be? And he said, I want to start a brewery. And I said, well, let's do it. And that was 6 months ago. He now has a business partner, a business plan. They're starting a brewery. Of course, men would just hop to it, right? Just go. But, I'm so proud of him for really listening and doing some of the inner work to say, what lights me up? This day job's not lighting me up. So what am I driving towards that's going to fill up my cup?
That's awesome.
So to be able to support each other, he's been so supportive for me with all of this habitual stuff. And now it's fun to be able to, flip the script and be supportive of him and his dreams too.
That is awesome. And I can't wait to visit this brewery. That's right up my alley and my husband's too. So we'll be one of the first patrons.
Okay. I got a seat with your name on it.
Sign us up. And as you said, that when we first met and connected, that was one of the number one things that I think we realized about each other right off the bat was I hate small talk anymore. I love having these in-depth conversations. But to your point of that conversation with your husband, we have to remind ourselves to have deeper conversations with each other, and not get so caught up in the surface of okay, this is just what we do the day in, the day out, especially as parents. Yeah. You can get caught in such routine and so caught in the shoulds and supposed tos that it's just so refreshing to hear that you had that conversation with him. And then it sparked into him actually saying, you know what? I am going to do that.
Yeah.
I am going to go after that. That is just such a great story. I wanted to ask you, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't know where to even start in terms of uncovering their potential within themselves?
It goes back to what you said. I cannot stress enough, creating space to get quiet. And whether it's coming up with a journaling practice or it's diving into meditation or yoga, mindfulness, creating and carving out the space to get quiet, and then asking yourself the questions like, I would used to refuse to journal because I was judging my own words. Meanwhile, no one's reading my journal but me. Right? I always had this, well, what if Elle reads this 10 years from now? Like, I'll be so embarrassed. No. Get it out onto paper. Get your dreams out there. Get your fears onto paper. When you are able to look at fear as an inhibitor to your success, it changes the way you look at it. And you're like, well, what am I afraid of? When I'm afraid, what does that look like? Or what does it feel like in my body? And you can't have those conversations with yourself if you aren't able to get quiet. And so for me, it looked like every night before going to bed, 30 minutes of just sitting, reflecting, writing if I choose to. I really love a good prompted journal because it makes me think of things that maybe I wouldn't have if it was just like an open-ended journal. But really getting quiet and creating that space to be alone. I think people associate being alone with lonely. I love being alone, especially now as a mom.
Love alone time.
hide in the bathroom just for 5 minutes to be alone. But when I'm alone with myself and being able to be alone and being able to be alone with my own thoughts, at first, to your point, it's very hard. But now it's like, it's so enriching. It gives me life to be alone and to really think and to reflect. And I'll notice when I haven't had enough time to do that I start acting differently. I am maybe not the best mom or the best partner. My me time is getting quiet, and however that looks, whether it's meditation or yoga or journaling, I need that time. And I think the world is so loud. There's so much noise. And we need that quiet time, even if it's 5 minutes a day. So that's my advice.
Such great advice. It's such great advice. And again, it's sad that that's uncomfortable for most of us to carve out quiet time for ourselves. I, too, am just by nature someone who absolutely adores being by myself. And
I'm never lonely.
No, I remember when I was younger thinking I'm weird because I really enjoy being by myself. Not all the time. I'm also a very social person. But as I've gotten older, and especially as a mom, you realize it's that whole saying of you can't pour from an empty cup that we've heard a million times. But it rings so true that you have to do something that buoys you up a little bit. And I'm the same way. If I feel like I haven't had a minute to myself to reflect. I love to journal too. I love prompted journals, entries. That's the best thing ever. Because what happens in journaling, I find, is that you'll uncover things that you didn't even know you were thinking or feeling. And then you're reading it back and it's like this revelation.
Yeah.
It just kind of gets everything out of you. But if I don't have that, I start to get really agitated with everyone around me. And I've kind of learned to take that as my indicator of, okay, you haven't done enough self-care recently, and now it's time to start prioritizing that. But I just love that you're offering up that advice because oftentimes I think people hear these conversations about passion and purpose and meaning and your authentic self and all of these things. And it can be really overwhelming when you just don't know. You're like, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't have that.
Right.
And I don't even know how to begin to access that. So I think you just gave us some really great advice in terms of how to get there. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. So on this podcast, we often discuss the topics of compassion and community. They're sort of my favorite topics. And I also love that everybody has a different answer to these questions. It's just, you probably find that in your interviews as well, right?
I do.
So can you tell us what your own definition of compassion is and how the words compassion and community relate to your goals and your vision for habitual and habitual leadership?
So as it relates to habitual, compassion is the core of how this whole thing works, right? If we are caring for one another, and we know that if I'm showing up and I know that you have a story. I don't know. I may not know your story, but I am certain that you have experienced some sort of hardship in your life. We all have. Being able to say, we can sit down and we can have a conversation. And because I know that we have been through it, whatever it is, I care for you. You're my sister in this journey. And if I care for you and you care for me and we keep pulling each other up, we might fall down, but I'm there. I'm going to be there to pull you back up. That's compassion. That is being able to say, whatever your story is, I know you've got one. I don't know what you've been through. I'm here to help you through that. I'm here if there's something I have that you don't, I want to offer that to you. And it then creates community, because people who believe in compassion and being able to help each other come to the table and put what we have to offer on the table for others, that creates a sense of community. Since this project started, yes, I tend to still go to Amazon for a quick order, but my heart is now, if I'm going to go buy something, I'm going to look around and find a women-owned business that I can support. Why wouldn't I? I'm going to spend the money anyway, so why don't I go out and support a women-owned business? And that's where you start to see the compassion, where you say, I care for women. I care for getting more money in the pockets of women. And so therefore, I'm going to go out and support their businesses. So, Habituelle at its core is compassion and it is community, and they work hand in hand together.
It so is. Now that you say it like that, I'm like, yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so beautiful to hear you say with such conviction and such passion how important it is that we pull each other up and be there for each other. You're really just driving home the fact that there's a great need we all have for that as females, and we have the ability to give it to each other.
Mm-hmm. There is no need or room or space for competition. There is enough work to go around. There's enough love to go around. Like, there's enough.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of like the proverbial like seat at the table. We're not running out of seats. The table keeps going. It's the longest table you've ever seen. Pull up a seat and join us.
I love that visual. What a great visual. But you're right. It's, again, I think it's just that there's been this feeling of competition, or that there aren't enough, and it is because there actually weren't enough seats at the table.
Yeah.
There once was not any seats at the table.
Right.
But I love that you're helping to shift that narrative and the vision.
Mm-hmm.
You're shifting the vision for all of us, that table can be as long as we want it to. It can have as many seats as we want it to have, and we can pull up a seat whenever we decide to.
Yep. We can make more seats.
We can
build
seats.
more seats if we need to.
Build more tables, build more seats.
Yes.
We're just flipping the script here. Jessi, I love everything about what you're doing. I love you. I can't thank you enough for just bringing this light and energy into the world. You are Be the Good at the core.
Oh, thank you.
1000%. You are the type of guest I dream of having on this podcast.
Oh, Christy, thank you. I'm so glad you're in my life.
Oh, same. Well, let's tell all the people where they can find you, how they can follow along with Habituelle, how they can access your leadership programs. Tell us all the details.
Sure. So Habituelle and Habituelle Life and Leadership Coaching can both be found on Instagram and on LinkedIn. My website is habitualleadership.com. And you can kind of reach me through any of those outlets. I'm pretty accessible through that way. So always open to an interview, a conversation, a coffee chat. So I just want to connect more and more people. And if that sounds like something you want, just put your hand up, because I'm here waiting for it.
And I can't wait to see, like, 5-10 years from now, when you are going to have the largest circle of women that anybody's ever known. She's going to say 5 years from now. So now there's 1,000 women. There's 2,000 women. I'm here cheering you on 1,000%. And again, I can't thank you enough for being here.
Well, thank you so much.